She was standing at the altar in a cathedral in Seoul when she understood that she had made a mistake. Not about the man beside her. Not yet. About the people who had arranged it. The dress was extraordinary. The building was extraordinary. The winter light through the arched windows was the kind of light that belongs in paintings, not in a Monday morning and not in a transaction dressed up as a ceremony. Everything around her was beautiful, in the way that things are beautiful when someone very wealthy and very deliberate has decided exactly what impression they want to make. And she had walked into it with her eyes open. That was the part she kept coming back to. She had known. She had read the contract. She had made her own conditions and watched them agreed to without hesitation and taken that as evidence that she had negotiated carefully. She had not been careful enough. Because in the third pew on the left side, wearing the expression of someone watching something they planned, there was a woman Adaeze Okafor did not recognize. And on the table in the vestry, mixed in with the catering invoices and the florist's card, there was an envelope with no name on it. She did not know about the envelope yet. She would. Because to understand what was in that envelope, to understand what it cost, what it changed, and why it could not simply be walked away from, you need to understand who Adaeze Okafor was before any of this happened. How far she had already come, how much she had already paid, and you need to understand one thing above everything else. The contract marriage was not the beginning of the danger. It was the moment the danger that had always been there finally stepped into the light. On the morning that changed everything, Dr. Adaeze Okafor was elbow deep in a man's chest cavity, and she was the calmest person in the room. Operating Theater 7 at Samsung Medical Center, Seoul, 6:43 in the morning. The patient had arrived by ambulance 40 minutes earlier, his heart stuttering in a pattern that told Ada exactly two things. The blockage was deep, and there was no time to wait for a more senior surgeon. She had not waited. A senior consultant named Dr. Lim had been called in for the complexity of the case. He was standing at Ada's right shoulder watching her work with an expression he was trying very hard to keep neutral. He was not succeeding. What was on his face was unmistakable. It was awe. Dr. Lim said quietly, almost to himself, "Where did you train for this specific approach?" Ada replied without looking up, "Lagos, then London, then here. Eyes on the field, Dr. Lim. I need you present." He straightened. He focused. 22 minutes later, the heart on the table was beating in a clean, steady rhythm. Outside the theater, Ada pulled off her gloves and stood for exactly one breath. She had learned in Korea to accept compliments quickly and move on. If she stood still in them, there was always someone nearby ready to remind her that she was a fellow, not a permanent staff member, that her visa had a timeline, that brilliant was not the same as belonging. She had learned to belong to the work itself and let the rest go. In the break room on the third floor, she sat with instant noodles she would not finish and a notebook she had been carrying for 7 months. The notebook was not a diary, it was a ledger. Columns of numbers, what she earned, what she sent home, what remained, what was still owed. The arithmetic of a family held together by one person from 10,000 kilometers away. Her father, Adaeze Okafor, had built his import-export business over 30 years. Not a wealthy man, a careful one. The kind who kept records, paid taxes, believed that discipline was its own protection. His business partner of 12 years had believed differently. For 3 years, the partner had been quietly hollowing out the company, rerouting contracts to shell accounts, inflating invoices, moving assets out of Adaeze's name and into his own. By the time Adaeze understood what had happened, the money was gone, the partner had vanished, and the creditors were circling a man who had never done a dishonest thing in his life. Ada had been in her 2nd year of fellowship when it happened. She had not gone home. She could not afford to go home. She had simply started sending more money back, stopped sleeping as much, and carried the ledger everywhere. Her phone rang. She answered before the second ring. Emeka said, and she could hear the grin before he spoke a word. "Ada, I heard you're doing a major surgery this morning. Is that true?" Ada replied, and the tiredness fell off her voice like something she'd forgotten she was wearing. "You're supposed to be studying. Emeka said. "I've been studying your career. It's way more interesting." She laughed. The real one. Not the professional version she rationed out in hospital corridors. The laugh that only came out when she was talking to her brother. Ada said, "Tuition money is coming Thursday. Focus on your exams." Emeka said, "Ada, you don't have to." Ada said quietly, "Thursday. Leave the rest to me." After she hung up, she opened her laptop. There was a document she had been avoiding, a legal notice written in Korean with her own handwritten translation in the margins. Her father's name appeared 4 times. The word she had circled twice in red pen was criminal liability. She closed the laptop. She stood up. She went back to work. That was Ada. She filed the fear somewhere useful and kept moving. If she stopped, the whole thing fell apart. So she did not stop. 2 in the afternoon, she was walking through the neurology corridor when she passed a cluster of interns around Dr. Sung, a senior cardiologist who had confused 20 years of seniority with wisdom. His eyes moved briefly to Ada as she passed. Ada's Korean was not perfect, but it was good enough. She understood exactly what was being said. She kept walking. Footsteps fell into pace beside her. Dr. Park Min-ho, warm-eyed, easy-smiling, the one person at this hospital who had decided on her first day that she was a colleague and had never wavered from that position. Min-ho said, "Ignore him. He said the same thing about me when I came from Busan. Give it 3 months." Ada said, "I've given him 4. Min-ho said nothing. He walked with her to the end of the corridor. Sometimes that was the most generous thing a person could offer. Not words, just presence. While Ada was in surgery that morning, something was happening simultaneously in the Kang Group boardroom that would reach her life like a stone dropped in water, the ripples arriving before she knew the stone had fallen. Chairman Kang Byung-ho was mid-sentence when his body interrupted him. In 75 years, his body had never done that. He had built an empire worth $4.2 billion from a single construction contract and sheer ferocity of will. He had never given his body permission to have opinions. It had them anyway. His hand went to his chest. His face changed. The room froze for 2 seconds. Then it erupted. Ada's pager went off at 12:03. She was gloved by 12:11. She still did not know who the patient was. She did not ask. In the theater, reputation belonged to everyone else. The heart on the table belonged to her. 51 minutes later, she walked out and took one breath. The nurse told her the patient's name. Ada looked through the observation window at the silver-haired man lying in recovery, broad-shouldered even in a hospital gown, commanding even unconscious. Ada said quietly, "He gets the same care as everyone else." She walked away. She did not see the assistant in the corridor behind her, making a phone call, reading from a fellowship file, a bank account, a father's debt record. By the time Ada reached the break room, Chairman Kang Byung-ho already knew more about her than most people learn in a year of friendship. The chairman did not do gratitude. He did strategy, and he had been doing it for 50 years. He was sitting up in bed when Ada entered his private room the next morning. She had her tablet, her notes, his recovery protocol. He dismissed all of it with one raised hand. Chairman Kang said, "Sit down, Dr. Okafor. I did not ask to see you about my health." She sat. She had learned when to wait. He told her about his grandson, Kang Jiune, 31, heir to everything, 4 marriage candidates over 2 years, refused them all, politely the first time, silently the second. With contempt for the third and fourth, Chairman Kang said, "He was 15 when his mother died. The doctor treating her made a preventable error. Jiune was the one who found her. He has not let anyone close since that day. 16 years. I am running out of time to wait for him to change on his own." Ada's nothing. Chairman Kang said, "I am dying, Dr. Okafor. This week bought me perhaps 6 more months. I have you to thank for that. I intend to see my grandson settled before I go. There are other reasons I will come to, but first, the offer." He laid it out the way he would lay out a billion-dollar acquisition. Every number calculated, every term already decided in his own mind. Marry Jiune. 1 year. A legal contract, separate rooms, no performance of love. In return, her father's criminal case dismissed and his debts cleared, her brother's university fees paid completely, a new cardiac surgery wing built and named for her at Samsung Medical Center, and a settlement at the end of 12 months that would make it impossible for anyone in her family to be in this position ever again. Ada said nothing for a long time. The chairman waited. Ada said, and her voice was completely steady, "No." The chairman nodded. He had expected that. He picked up his phone, dialed, and passed it to her without a word of explanation. It was her uncle, calling from Lagos. His voice was barely controlled. Uncle Chukwu said, "Ada, your father was arrested this morning, EFCC." The EFCC, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, is Nigeria's most feared anti-corruption agency. Their investigations move fast. Their arrests are public. The shame of being named in a case follows a family for years, even when the accused is entirely innocent, especially then. Uncle Chukwu continued, "They are saying criminal liability for the outstanding debts. He has 48 hours to settle, or it goes before a judge. We need 8 million naira, Ada. Please." Ada held the phone against her ear long after her uncle stopped speaking. The chairman did not say a word. He simply waited, in the way of a man who knows that the most powerful move in any negotiation is to give the other person space to arrive at the only available conclusion. She set the phone down. She folded her hands. She looked at the wall, the way a person looks when they are doing arithmetic that has nothing to do with numbers. Ada said, "I have conditions." Chairman Kang said, "Of course you do." She listed them. Paper marriage only. Fellowship continues uninterrupted. Her finances, friendships, private life, entirely hers. If he withdraws for any reason, she keeps everything already paid. And the first payment, the one that would free her father tonight, transferred before she signed a single document. Chairman Kang said, "Agreed, all of it." Ada said, "You mentioned other reasons." Chairman Kang said, "The Kang Group is pursuing major expansion contracts in West Africa, Nigeria specifically. Certain partnerships require trust that cannot be built from a boardroom in Seoul. A Nigerian daughter-in-law, connected to Lagos, fluent in the culture, that is a strategic asset of considerable value." Ada said quietly, "So, I am not just a bride, I am a business decision." Chairman Kang said, "Everything I do is a business decision, Dr. Okafor. That does not mean it cannot also be the right thing." She studied him carefully, stripped him back past the presentation. She had expected pure calculation. She found that, yes, but underneath it, something older, something that looked remarkably like a grandfather who was afraid of dying before his grandson remembered how to feel anything. Ada said, "Send the first payment tonight, then we have a deal." He shook her hand. Firm grip, warm hand. The handshake of a man who had just gotten exactly what he wanted, and who, in this single moment, permitted himself something very close to relief. What Ada did not know as she walked out of that room, 3 floors up, a Kang Group assistant had just forwarded her detailed profile to a private email address. Not the chairman's, someone else's. Someone who had been watching this situation with considerable interest and had their own very specific reasons for wanting to know exactly who was about to enter the Kang family circle. Her name was Jiune, and she was patient in the way that only truly dangerous people are patient. The payment cleared at 11:47 that night. Ada was sitting on the floor of her apartment watching the bank notification appear on her phone. She sat there for a while, then she called her father. Adaeze Okafor answered on the first ring, which meant he had been awake. His voice was careful and stripped, the voice of a man who has been publicly humiliated and is still too close to it for any perspective. Adaeze said, "Ada, you didn't have to." Ada said, "Papa, it's done, just rest." Adaeze said, "How? How did you?" Ada said gently but firmly, "I made an arrangement, a good one. It's only for a year and I'm safe, I promise. But you cannot ask me anything else about it tonight. Tonight you just need to sleep." There was a long silence. Adaeze Okafor had built his entire career on trust, the belief that the people closest to him were the safest to trust. That belief had cost him everything, and now his daughter was on the phone from Seoul at midnight, telling him she had made an arrangement she could not fully explain. He knew her well enough to know that if she said it was a good arrangement, she had thought it through 40 times before agreeing. Adaeze said finally, very quietly, "You carry too much, my daughter. Ada said, "It's not heavy when it's for you." She did not tell him the family name of the man she was about to marry. She did not say Kang Group. She told herself she was protecting him from worry. But later, much later, she would understand that some part of her had already sensed something was not entirely right, had needed to keep her father separate from it, the way you keep something precious away from a flame, even before you are sure there is a fire. If this story has your full attention, and we promise it only builds from here, hit that like button and subscribe right now. New stories drop every week, and episode 2 of this one is going to leave your jaw on the floor. Before Adaeze Okafor and Kang Jiune were in the same room for the first time, there is something about him you need to understand. Jiune was not a villain. The actual villains of this story are far subtler. They will not show their full faces until it is almost too late. Jiune was a man who had made a decision at 15 and had never, not once in 16 years, allowed himself to question whether it was still serving him. The decision was simple: nothing gets in. In Korea, families like the Kangs are called chaebol, vast family-owned conglomerates that control entire sectors of the economy, from construction to finance to technology. The heirs to these empires are raised under a specific kind of pressure, the pressure of knowing that everything around you has a price and that you yourself are an asset to be deployed. Emotions are inefficiencies. Trust is a liability. Distance is the only real protection. Jiune had absorbed all of this with perfect discipline. His company feared him. His competitors respected him. His grandfather looked at him sometimes with an expression that was equal parts pride and grief. He was in a board meeting when his assistant appeared in the doorway with the expression of a man delivering news he had not enjoyed receiving. Jiune looked at him. The assistant held up one finger. "Your grandfather." Jiune ended the meeting in 30 seconds. His assistant said carefully, "The chairman is asking for you at the hospital." He said, and I am quoting directly, "Tell Jiune I almost died this week, and I would like to see his face before I finish the job." Jiune looked at his assistant for 3 seconds. Then he reached for his jacket. That was the thing about Jiune almost nobody got to see. Behind 16 years of ice, there was one person for whom none of the architecture applied: his grandfather. The one man who had been there at the beginning and was still, stubbornly and furiously, there now. He walked into the hospital room expecting his grandfather propped up on pillows, already on the phone, refusing to accept that his body had inconvenienced him. He found a woman standing at the window. Her back was to him. Tall, natural hair, dark skin. She was looking out at Seoul with the particular stillness of someone entirely comfortable in their own company. She turned when she heard the door. They looked at each other. 3 seconds, perhaps 4. The chairman, watching from the bed, went very still in the way of someone watching the first move in a chess game they have been planning for months. Jiune broke eye contact. He looked at his grandfather. Jiune said, "What is this?" Chairman Kang said calmly, "This is Dr. Adaeze Okafor. She saved my life 4 days ago. She has agreed to be your wife." The silence that followed had weight. Jiune said very quietly, "Your what?" Chairman Kang said, "Your wife. 1 year. The contract is prepared. Everything is arranged." Jiune turned and looked at Ada fully for the first time, and what came out of his mouth next, he would spend considerable time afterwards wishing had come out differently. Jiune said, cold and measured, "I don't know what he offered you, but I'd suggest you take the money and decline the marriage. I don't perform. Whatever you've been told about this arrangement, it will not become what you're hoping for. People like you come into situations like this with a specific expectation, and I have no intention of meeting it. People like you." Ada looked at him with the particular calm of a woman who has been in rooms where she was underestimated so many times that the surprise wore off years ago. Ada said, "Dr. Okafor, that is my name, and I am not hoping for anything from you. I did not choose this any more than you did. If you have objections, your grandfather is in that bed, excellent room to raise them. But do not speak about me as though I am a category. I am a specific person. Speak to me like one or don't speak to me at all." Nobody had spoken to Kang Jiune like that. Not his executives, not his legal team. not the 4 women placed before him, each of whom had either shrunk from his coldness or performed warmth hoping he would soften. Ada had done neither. She had simply declined to accept the frame he had put around her, with complete calm, without the need for his approval. Something moved very briefly across his expression, not contempt, not warmth, but something in a territory he no longer had a name for. He looked at his grandfather. Jiune said, "We are not finished with this." Chairman Kang said, "No, but we are finished for today. Sit down." That night, alone in his office, Jiune opened the file his research team had compiled on Dr. Adaeze Okafor. He read it the way he read everything, without reaction, extracting only what was factually useful: her training, her fellowship, her brother, her father's debt, and then he reached the section about her father's business collapse. He read the name of the partner who had destroyed Emmanuel Okafor's company. He stopped. He read it again. His face did not change, but his hand, resting on the desk, closed slowly into a fist. He picked up the phone, dialed his private investigator, retained separately from the company's official resources, for exactly the kind of situation where the company itself might be part of the problem. Jiune said, very quietly, "Cross-reference the Okafor file against the Africa expansion records from 7 years ago. Every payment, every partnership, everything. I want it tonight." The report came back at 3 in the morning. Jiune read it at his desk, still in his suit jacket, the city quiet outside. It was worse than he had suspected. 7 years ago, during the early phase of the Kang Group's West African expansion, the company had entered supplier partnerships in Lagos. The process was overseen not by the chairman, but by a mid-level executive named Adaeze Okafor, the father of Jiune, who ran the Africa division at the time. Adaeze Okafor had appointed a local facilitator named Victor Adeyemi to manage the supplier relationships, who had, within 2 years, systematically destroyed his Nigerian business partner of 12 years, a man named Emmanuel Okafor, and vanished with the assets. The Kang Group had not ordered this. Jiune was certain of that. But the Kang Group's expansion into Nigeria had created the exact conditions that made it possible. Adaeze Okafor's signature was on the original partnership document that gave Adeyemi his position and his access. And Adaeze Okafor's daughter was currently asking routine questions about the chairman's wedding through Jihune's own assistant. Jiune sat with this for a long time. Then he made the decision that would cost him everything. He closed the file. He did not tell Ada. He told himself he needed to understand the full shape of it before saying anything. He told himself that telling her now, when nothing was certain, would only cause harm. He told himself that there was a right moment for this, and this was not it. He told himself all of this, and some of it was even true. But here is what he did not tell himself. What he could not afford to examine in that room at 3 in the morning with the file open on his screen. He did not tell himself that the night in the hospital when he had looked at Ada across his grandfather's bed and she had refused to be diminished, something had shifted in him. That he was not only protecting the company, that there was a specific version of the next 12 months, one he had not planned for and had not invited, that he was unwilling to lose before he had even understood what it was. He closed his laptop. He went home. 2 days before the wedding, Jiune found Jiune in the Kang Group's rooftop garden. She had always known where to find him when he needed to think. She had made it her business, over 8 years of proximity, to know. There had been a time, early on, when the proximity had been something more. 3 months, maybe 4, of something that had never been named because Jiune did not name things. She had understood eventually that his silence was not ambiguity. It was the answer. She had filed it the way practical people file conclusions they do not enjoy, and she had stayed close. Closeness to the Kang family was worth more than the alternative. She had always understood that. She sat across from him without asking permission, the way people sit when they believe they have earned that right. Jiune said, keeping it carefully light, "A Nigerian doctor. I didn't see that coming." Jiune said, "Nobody did." Jiune said, "Is she good?" Jiune said, "She trained in 3 countries and earned this fellowship on merit alone. She's exceptional." A brief pause. Jiune let it breathe. Seoul said, "And you're comfortable with this arrangement?" Jiune said, "And there was a warning in it." Yuna. So Yuna said, "I'm asking as a friend. I've always asked as a friend." Jihoon looked at her. 8 years. He knew she was careful, ambitious, deeply connected to the Kang Group's Africa story through her father's legacy. He knew she smiled the way people smile when they have already thought further ahead than you. What he did not know was whether she knew what he now knew about her father's role in Emmanuel Okafor's ruin. And not knowing that was the most dangerous position of all. Jihoon said, "I'm comfortable." Yuna stood, she smoothed her jacket, and then, casually, the way someone mentions the weather, she said something that made the temperature in Jihoon's chest drop by several degrees. So Yuna said, "I hope she doesn't have any complicated feelings about the West Africa expansion. Some Nigerians, they have long memories about the early partnership years. I'm sure Dr. Okafor is too professional for that. But you know how it is. Family history can complicate things." She smiled. She walked away. Jihoon did not move for a long time after she left. She knew. He did not know how much. He did not know whether it was everything or only enough. But she knew, and she had just told him she knew, in the specific way that people tell you things they want you to understand without being able to prove they said it. She had not been invited to the wedding, and she had just told him she was coming anyway. The Kang family residence was large without being aggressive about it, beautiful without being cold. The kind of house built by people who understood that money is only impressive when it whispers. Ada walked in with one suitcase, a laptop bag, and a potted plant she had been keeping alive in her Seoul apartment for 2 years. She put it on the windowsill. She put the family photograph on the writing desk. She opened her notebook and wrote the date at the top of a fresh page. Day 1. The first dinner was a performance. Chairman Kang made most of the conversation, the ease of a man who had been brokering difficult deals for 50 years and found this one entertaining. He asked Ada about Lagos, about her fellowship, about Seoul in winter. She answered warmly and specifically. Real answers. Jihoon contributed 4 words in 45 minutes. Ada was given chopsticks. She managed the rice and soup. She reached for a piece of braised beef, and the chopsticks, for the 4th time, declined to cooperate. She set them down. She picked up the beef between 2 fingers. Natural, unhurried, the way her grandmother had taught her since she was 3. She ate it without ceremony. Across the table, Jihoon's eyes moved to her hands, then to her face. Jihoon said, "There are forks," Ada said without looking up. "I know. I don't need one." Chairman Kang hid something very close to a smile in his water glass. That night, from behind her partly open door, Ada spoke to Emeka for 40 minutes, laughing with the real laugh. Herself, completely, in a house that was not hers and a life currently on loan. Jihoon had come downstairs for water. He stopped at the top of the 2nd landing when the sound reached him. He did not understand a single word, but he stood in the dark corridor for 30 seconds listening to the sound of a person who had found the one space in this house where she was entirely free. Something moved in him that he did not have a name for, because he had not needed the name in a very long time. Ada turned and saw him through the gap in the door. Ada said, "Sorry, was I too loud?" Jihoon said, "No." He got his water. He went back upstairs. At the top he stopped just for a moment, listening to her voice start up again below. The etiquette mistake happened on the 4th day. Ada had bowed too shallowly to Mrs. Wauman, the household's senior staff manager, and spent that evening at her desk with 2 Korean etiquette guides, taking notes in the same ledger where she kept her financial columns. She did not complain. She did not ask for help. She simply identified the gap and began filling it. The hospital incident happened on a Tuesday, 12 days into the arrangement, and it mattered because of who witnessed it. Ada was presenting a complex post-operative case in the cardiology department's morning review. Midway through, Dr. Reyet Sung interrupted with a question that was not really a question, a challenge to her credentials wrapped in technical language, designed to make her prove herself in front of 12 colleagues. Ada answered it, precisely and fully, without losing composure. Dr. Sung followed up with another, then another. Minnow, The far end of the table put down his pen. Minho said in a tone that carried the entire room, "Dr. Okafor has already answered that. Better than any of us would have. If there's a clinical question here, ask it. If there's another kind of question, this isn't the room for it." The room went still. Dr. Sung said nothing further. Ada continued her presentation. What nobody in that room knew, Kang Ji-hoon was standing in the corridor outside on his way to visit his grandfather when he heard Minho's voice through the partially open door. He stopped walking. He heard the whole exchange. He stood in the corridor afterwards, looking at the door, the look of a person revising a classification they had been very confident about. That evening at dinner, when Minho's name came up in passing, Ada mentioning he had covered a shift for her, Ji-hoon's jaw tightened in a way that was barely visible and entirely involuntary. The chairman noticed. He said nothing. But he noticed. She found the photograph on a Wednesday afternoon, not by searching, simply by opening the wrong door in the east wing while looking for extra storage. A small study she had not been shown. Neat, almost sparse. A desk, a bookshelf, a single framed photograph on the wall. A woman, Korean. Striking, warm-eyed in the specific way that warmth sometimes skips a generation. She was laughing at something outside the frame, her head turned slightly, completely unguarded. On the back of the frame, in handwriting that Ada recognized from documents she had already signed, was a single word, Ioma, mother. Ada stood in the doorway for a long time. Then she understood something she had not understood before. This was not Ji-hoon's office. It was not a general family room. It was specifically his, the only personal space in this entire house that belonged to him alone. And the one thing he had chosen to keep here, the single thing on the walls, was her. Ada thought about what the chairman had said. The preventable error, Ji-hoon finding her, 16 years of walls that began in this particular grief. And then she thought about the fact that she, a doctor, was now living in his house, wearing his ring at his grandfather's explicit arrangement. She thought about what it must cost him every single day to look at her profession and not see the worst day of his life. She closed the door quietly. She did not mention it to anyone, but she carried it with her into the kitchen 3 nights later, and she was for the first time genuinely gentle with him instead of simply fair. The Mrs. Yeon moment happened 3 days later, and it cracked something that had been sealed for a long time. Ada mentioned her at dinner. An elderly patient, monthly cardiac visits, son had lost his job, treatment costs becoming difficult. Not a request, just answering the chairman's question about her day. 3 days later, Mrs. Yeon's entire hospital balance was cleared, posted anonymously. Ada waited in the hospital cafeteria. When Ji-hoon appeared, she waited until he sat down. Ada said, "Mrs. Yeon in Ward 7, settled, anonymously." Ji-hoon said, picking up his coffee, "Hospitals receive anonymous donations." Ada said, "Ji-hoon?" His name, the first time she had used it, they both registered it. Ada said, "Why do you work so hard to make sure nobody sees when you're decent?" He looked at her for a long moment. The measuring look had changed, no longer contemptuous, shifted into something closer to genuine assessment. Ji-hoon said, "Don't make it something it isn't." Ada said, "I'm making it exactly what it is." He left without responding. He did not tell her she was wrong. The night before the wedding, Ada could not sleep. She lay in the dark for an hour, then got up and did what she always did when the world became too loud. She cooked. She found tomatoes, Scotch bonnet peppers, onions, long-grain rice. She had cooked jollof rice in far less equipped kitchens. London student accommodation with 1 electric burner, a Lagos flat after medical school with no hot water, a hospital staff room in Abuja with a borrowed pot. She put in her earphones and stopped managing herself and simply existed. She did not hear him come in. Ji-hoon appeared in the doorway in a plain white t-shirt, no suit, no armor. In the dim kitchen light, he looked startlingly young, like the 15-year-old who had found his mother was still somewhere inside the 31-year-old who had built walls around that wound. The smell reached him before he could form an opinion about it. Warm, layered, deeply specific, something that bypassed every defense he had without asking permission. Ada said, "You want some?" Ji-hoon said, "I don't eat at 2 a.m. Ada said simply, "Okay." She turned back to the stove. He stood in the doorway. Then he pulled out a stool at the island and sat down. He did not explain. She did not ask. She cooked. He watched. When the rice was done, she put a bowl in front of him without asking. He tasted it. The expression that crossed his face was involuntary, here and gone in a second. A crack in the stone, the face of someone remembering what it felt like to enjoy something without needing permission first. Jiune said, "What is this?" Adaeze said, "Jollof rice, Nigerian. Don't overthink it." They stayed in that kitchen until close to 4 in the morning. She talked. He listened, occasionally saying something short and precise that made her want to hear the longer version. At one point, in the comfortable quiet that had settled between them, Adaeze said something about a patient she had lost early in her training. A young woman, preventable in hindsight. She said it the way surgeons speak about their losses, factually as a scar that has closed but not disappeared. Jiune said, and his voice was different. "How did you come back from that?" Adaeze said. "I stopped asking whether I was good enough and started asking what I needed to learn. There's a difference. One is a spiral, the other is a path." A long silence. Jiune said very quietly, and she understood he was not talking about her anymore. What if the doctor who made the mistake never learned anything? What if they just continued? Adaeze looked at him across the island. In the low light without the armor, she saw the 15-year-old, the one who had found his mother, the one who had never stopped finding her. Adaeze said gently, "Then that's on them, not on everyone who came after." Jiune said nothing, but he did not leave. At one point, she said something else about the hospital that made him laugh. Brief, quickly recovered, but real. She pretended not to notice, because pointing it out would make it impossible to happen again. The morning of the wedding, Adaeze got ready alone. She did her makeup the way she did surgery, precisely without self-doubt. The dress went on. She looked at herself in the mirror once, not searching, not questioning, just confirming she was ready, and then being ready. There was a voice note from Emeka. She pressed play. He said her name twice. Then, "You carried us when you didn't have to. You always carry us. I see you, Adaeze. I see all of it." She sat with that for a moment, then she stood up, picked up her bag, and walked to the door. The cathedral was extraordinary. The chairman had been unable to help himself on the question of the venue. Arched windows, winter light, stone pillars that had been standing since before anyone in that room had been born. The kind of beauty that makes a person feel, briefly and irrationally, that whatever happens inside it must therefore be real. Adaeze arrived in the black car, walked through the side entrance, and stood alone in the vestry for 4 minutes before the ceremony began. 4 minutes was enough. She stood there in a dress she had not chosen, in a city that was not hers. And she did what she always did, when the arithmetic was not adding up the way she wanted it to. She went through it piece by piece. The contract, her father's freedom, Emeka's fees, 1 year, 12 months, 365 days, and then she would walk out of this with everything she needed and everything she had promised, and not one thing more or less. She was a surgeon. She had stood in scrub rooms before procedures that frightened her and turned it into focus. She could do this. She straightened, she walked to the door. The guest list was 6 people. The chairman in his wheelchair positioned to see everything. 3 legal witnesses whose eyes tracked the proceedings with professional neutrality. 2 corporate attorneys with identical navy suits and the specific blankness of people paid not to have opinions. And the woman in the 3rd pew. Adaeze noticed her the moment she stepped through the cathedral doors. Korean, late 20s. Dressed with the precision of someone who understands that every visible choice is a message. The cut of the coat, the angle of the hat, the pearls that were expensive enough to be real, but restrained enough to be tasteful. She was sitting with the stillness of someone entirely at home in a room they were not supposed to be in. She met Ada's eyes as Adaeze walked the aisle. And she smiled, not warmly, not coldly, but with the particular composure of a person watching something unfold exactly as they expected. Adaeze did not know her. She filed it, deep, careful, and kept walking. Jiune was already at the altar. He had been there for 6 minutes, standing perfectly still, facing forward. He did not turn when she entered. He did not turn when she reached him. He stood beside her, the way a person stands in a position they have accepted rather than chosen. back straight, jaw set, the controlled composure of someone who has decided in advance not to feel anything about this. Ada stood beside him and felt, for the first time since she had agreed to this, the full weight of what she had agreed to. Not the money, not the conditions, not the contract she had negotiated carefully and believed protected her. The weight of being beside a person who had already decided she was a category, who had already reached his conclusion, who was standing here in this extraordinary building in this winter light and experiencing none of it. The officiant began. The words were in Korean. She understood enough of them. There was a moment when the word for agreement was spoken and both of them said yes, one after the other, and their voices did not match in any register, not in tone, not in volume, not in what either of them meant by it. Jiune reached for her hand. He placed the ring on her finger without looking at her hand. She did not look at the ring. They both looked forward. The chairman, watching from his wheelchair, had something on his face that was more complex than Ada had expected. Not satisfaction. She had expected satisfaction. What she saw was something more like longing. The longing of a man who had set something in motion and was now watching it move and was no longer entirely certain he had been wise to start it. And in the third pew, Jiune watched the ring go on. She did not blink. She did not look away. She simply watched, with the focused attention of someone who has waited a long time for a specific moment and is now carefully confirming that it has arrived. No vows of love. The officiant pronounced them married. The witnesses signed. The attorneys countersigned. The contract that had been agreed in a hospital room 3 days ago was now a legal fact. Ada and Jiune walked out of that cathedral side by side, close enough to touch, separated by everything unspoken. If you are watching this on someone else's recommendation and you are not yet subscribed, now is the time. Episode 2 is already written, and it will not be gentle. That evening, Ada sat at her writing desk and looked at the ring on her finger. Turned it once. Felt its weight. A message from Minho. "Are you okay?" She typed, "I'm fine." Deleted it. Typed, "I will be." She opened her laptop. The video call began to connect. Emeka's face started to appear on screen, and then she heard Jihoon's voice from the hallway. He was on the phone. His voice was unguarded in the way people are when they believe they are completely alone. Not calculating, not cold in the managed way she had come to expect. Just honest, in the specific way that private honesty can be the most revealing version of a person. She closed the laptop softly. She sat very still. She listened. Jihoon said, "I don't care what he arranged. I'll find out what her angle is. A foreign doctor does not agree to something like this without a reason beyond sentiment. These people always have a plan. The marriage will be over before the year is up." These people. Ada sat with those two words for a long time. She was not naive about what they meant. She had heard them before, in hospital corridors, in faculty meetings, wrapped in polite language, or delivered without it. She had heard the version that knows exactly what it is, and the version that has never once had to examine itself. Jihoon's was the second kind, spoken by a man who would be genuinely confused if someone pointed it out, because it had never occurred to him that it needed pointing out, which, in some ways, was the harder version to receive. At least the first kind was honest about itself. She walked to the window. Seoul at night. 12 million lights, 12 million lives, with no knowledge of the woman standing at this window, trying to locate herself within it. She took the ring off, set it on the sill, looked at it sitting there. She picked it back up. She put it on because she had not said yes to Jihoon. She had never said yes to Jihoon. She had said yes to her father's freedom and her brother's future, and those things had not changed because of two words in a hallway. She was going to complete this year. She was going to protect her family. And then she was going to leave. Ani ga aga nihu. We will move forward. She whispered it in Igbo, the language she kept for when she was most herself. She meant it completely. She went back to her desk, opened the laptop. The video call reconnected. Emeka's face on screen, eyebrows raised, the expression that meant he had been waiting and had opinions about it. She smiled, the real smile. And then the email notification appeared in the corner of her screen. Unknown sender. No subject line in the preview. just an attachment. She almost didn't open it. She almost left it for morning. She opened it. A photograph. Old, grainy, the quality of something scanned from a physical print that had been handled many times. Two men at a business signing table. Formal, the handshake of people who believed in this moment that they were building something together. One man she did not recognize. Nigerian, mid-40s in this photograph, well-dressed, the smile of someone very good at performing confidence. The other man was her father, young, 15 years ago, maybe. Before the losses, before the debt, before the years of being dismantled from the inside by someone he trusted completely. He was smiling. Ada stared at the photograph. Then she scrolled up and read the subject line she had missed on first opening. You should know who you married into. She stared at the screen. Amika's face was still in the corner, still talking, still gesturing. She could see him, but she could not hear him. She looked at the photograph the way she looked at a scan. Slowly, systematically, the way a surgeon looks when they know something is there and are determining exactly where. The unknown man, the documents on the signing table. And there, slightly out of focus but unmistakable, a corporate pen set, a logo, the Kang Group logo. Ada did not move. She was a cardiothoracic surgeon. She had spent years learning how to receive terrible information without letting it move through her body until she had first moved it through her mind. You do not flinch in a theater. You do not step back from a scan that shows you something you did not want to see. You look at it longer, you look at it more carefully, you turn it over and over until you understand what it is actually telling you, as distinct from what it first appears to be saying. So she looked. Her father's business partner. Victor Adeyemi, that was the name that appeared in the legal notice, the name her father had repeated like a wound in every phone call for 3 years. Victor Adeyemi, who had spent 12 years building Emmanuel's trust and then 3 years quietly dismantling him from the inside. Who had, when the dismantling was complete, simply vanished. Adeyemi had needed a position, a cover, a legitimacy that would give him access to her father's supplier networks without her father's supervision. And Kang Group's Lagos expansion, Seo Daewon's Lagos expansion, had given him exactly that. She thought about the chairman's offer, the specific phrasing of it. A Nigerian daughter-in-law connected to Lagos, fluent in the culture. She had heard that and thought, he wants a business asset. She had not heard, he wants someone whose silence about the past can be purchased with a future. She thought about whether those two things were the same. She thought about whether the chairman knew the full extent of what Seo Daewon had enabled, or whether he was simply a man building a bridge to a market and had never looked closely at what was buried underneath the foundation. She thought about Jiune, sitting across from her at dinner every night for 2 weeks, watching her manage chopsticks, listening to her talk about her patients, eating jollof rice at 2 a.m, saying nothing. Not nothing because he didn't know. Nothing because he had decided something. And what he had decided, whether it was to protect his family or to protect her, or to protect the fragile and unlikely thing that had begun to grow in the kitchen at 2 a.m, she did not yet know. But she was going to find out. That was what Ada did. Not collapse, not flee, not tear the ring off and drive to the airport. She had said yes for her father's freedom and her brother's future, and those reasons were still standing. But she had also walked into this with her eyes open, and her eyes were open now, wider than before. She opened her notebook. She turned to a fresh page. She wrote the date at the top. She did not write day 1. She wrote, "What do I know and what do I need to find out?" And she began to write. And here is the question this story leaves you with tonight. Was Jihoon silent because the truth would implicate his family, the chairman, the empire, everything he was heir to? Or was he silent because the file had also shown him something else, something about the woman sitting across from him at that dinner table, and he had not yet found the courage to be the person who told her? And who sent the email? Who was watching closely enough to know about her father, about Kang Group, about the connection, and waited until the ring was already on Ada's finger before sending it? Jiune sat in the third pew. She came uninvited. She watched the ring go on. She watched Ada's face as Ada noticed her. She let Ada file it away, unknowing, and then she walked out of that cathedral, got into her car, took out her phone and sent an email to an unknown address with a single photograph attached. Some people play long games. Jiune had been playing this one for 7 years. Before you go, drop a comment right now. Do you think Jiune is hiding the truth to protect Ada or to protect himself? And what is Jiune actually after? Revenge or something far more complicated than that? We read every comment, and the answers are going to surprise you. Episode 2 is coming. Ada now knows she is living in the house of the family that helped destroy hers. She knows Jiune knows, and she is not going to wait for him to decide when it is the right time to tell the truth. Jiune is about to discover that silence has a price. Jiune is about to make her first visible move, and what actually happened in Lagos 7 years ago, who gave the order, who knew, and who has been covering it ever since, is bigger and darker than any of them have been willing to say out loud. Subscribe, share this with someone who needs a great story. Stay with us, because this is only the beginning.
How could you do this?
I trusted you.
I did.
I did nothing wrong. Stop accusing.